Okay, so we are going to start now the destruction sequence in the scene. In this video, I'll just go through the interior roof component and highlight some of the methods that I will use for all the other parts. So I have broken down the whole scene into different render layers. This one is the interior walls and roof, and then I also have the studs, which are right here. So I'll separately offline do the same breaking process that we're going to discuss on each of these individual components, and then we'll put them together. I'll go through the breaking of the road and the barrier here, because what's happening is the driller is rising up, and then a driller is crashing down onto the barrier and the road. So all these pieces around here, where the body is hitting the barrier and the tentacles are hitting the barrier and the road, everything will have to be broken like a concrete, and the blacktop here for the road, and all this smoke and debris will have to fly there also. And then further down the sequence, driller is rising up and digging a hole in the middle of the road, which also will create a lot of the debris and flying pieces around here. But in this video, let's focus on the fundamentals and the roof that we are going to break. And it's the same process basically that I'll apply for all the different parts of the barn. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm going to use fracture, which I demonstrated in my previous video. So let's open up the menus here. The first step here in fracture is you break what you want to break. So here I'm going to break the roof. So break selected, and by default it's going to break as Voronoi, but we'll change this shortly. And the next thing you need is the simulator. But before we go down to the simulator, let's change the name of this break. Roof. Okay. I'm going to create a simulator here, and that's the World 1 simulator. I'm not going to change the name for this video. So I'll select the simulator, select the roof, and connect them together. Now we'll go into the UI for fracture and open up the options here. The first thing I'm going to do is deselect the activation here. We don't want the roof to have any activation by way of bullet physics. We want to control that a little bit. So I'll uncheck that. And the other thing obviously is, let me go back to frame 1 so you can see. This is not a Voronoi type fracturable geometry, so we'll change that to splinter, which is more like wood pieces. I'm going to go with the default settings here, but in the final render, I'll increase the details so that we have many more pieces flying rather than some of the big ones that you see here. Okay, so that's the start. The next thing is in the event. Oh, before we go to the events, just a quick note here. In globals, I'm going to go with negative 98.1 as the gravity, but I think this is incorrect. It should be 981. Should be changed to 981 because the default scale in Maya is in centimeters and 9.8 is meters. So, but I'm gonna go with this one for now and see how it works out. Okay, and bullet physics is what or the solver that we are going to use here. Let's go to events and delete what we have there. We're gonna build this from the scratch, as I demonstrated in my previous video. So the one that I want is something that would connect the broken pieces that we have here to the simulator, and for that I'm going to use bomb event and change this to break roof event. Right, so we don't need the object filter here because our geometry is already pre-fractured, and I don't need the push modifier, which is the explosion characteristic, but we are going to control that separately. Okay, so that's one thing, and the second thing I need now is another event which would be activate in volume, because we don't want the entire roof to be broken. We want to control the breaking of the roof with the rising and moving around of this driller, and we're going to control that through through the volume. So I'm not going to change the name for this video. Let me just make sure that we are not in viewport 2, because fracture is not yet compatible with viewport 2. You may not be able to see a lot of the elements that we are creating here, such as the volume. So I'm going to go back to the legacy viewport. Let me change this roof material back to what it should be. Okay. Going to deactivate this for now, because I don't want to run the simulation while we are still building it. Here is the volume activation area. So anything that is in this area will be broken. Basically, that's the idea. I'm going to change the shape of this node to sphere, and let's look at what driller is doing throughout this simulation. So as you go around 55, driller is rising up. So this is where things start to fall apart. Let me change the orientation of this a little bit so that we can handle it properly. A little bit more. Okay. So this is where the area that is covered by this sphere should be broken. So I'm going to first shape this in a way that it covers the area that I would like broken at this particular point, and hit S for setting the keyframe. I have it on auto keyframe, so from here on it will just set the keyframe as we go. So I'm gonna go 2 frames before and move this down, because I don't want this to, and also shrink the size. I don't want this volume to affect any of the broken roof at that point. So now when driller is rising, let me also bring this down here. I know it kind of starts to break here, but I don't think we will notice it in the scheme of things. So I'm not going to worry about that for now. And next frame, the sphere is up with the driller's head and tentacles. Now driller's head has completely emerged, and the body has kind of also emerged, but towards the back. So I'm going to take this sphere a little bit to the back and also move in and rotate it so that it sort of covers the general area of the breaking here. Yeah, something like this. Maybe inward a little. And go few frames forward, and now driller is on its way out. So let's change this a little bit here and bring it up. And this is too big at this point, so I'm going to make the size a little smaller and a little further up here. And further down it's now crashing, so maybe up to here all the roof elements will be broken at this point. Okay, so that's basically the idea, that this is how much damage we are envisioning onto the roof. By the way, the workflow here in Fracture is completely procedural, so if you ever see that something didn't work out properly, you can go back and change the animation. Okay, so now let's first see, just to start, how this breaking works out. Okay, now what's with the color here? As soon as simulation is run within Fracture, the whole simulation is passing through the filters that we have provided. So if all the successful filtering is happening at this particular event level, then the return color is purple. In this case, you can obviously change it by clicking here and selecting any other color, but that's the reason why you see this color. Also, if you don't want to see it, just in case, you can go to global and uncheck this draw, and that representation will go away, but for now I do want to see it, so I'll leave it open. And you will see that the next color that we should see is let me change this to a bright yellow color. This yellow will mean that any pieces that are coming in contact with the volume activate in volume, remember. So volume will turn into yellow color. So let's see if it works out. So you can see that all the pieces that are breaking here, they are converted into yellow color, and this will continue as driller is coming forward. So I'm happy with the way it's progressing, but obviously we don't want the pieces to fall down. The pieces should go up when driller is especially making a contact around frame 55 and 60, in that range. Alright, so let's go back and add a modifier to our event, and that's this modifier. I'll have it assigned and change it or choose velocity, and I'm going to give velocity 85 for the Y. I also want pieces to kind of fall on the side here, not back inside the barn. And if you look at the global here, let me just move around here. So X is in this direction, kind of facing this corner onward out, and Z is in this direction, and Y is obviously up. So what I would like to do is influence the velocity as it goes up and out this way. So that would be negative Z, and let's start with negative 15. And for now I'm going to leave this X 0, and let's just see how the initial impact comes out. Okay, so the pieces are flying up and then they are coming down, but something else is happening. As driller is coming forward, the pieces are flying all across and flying up for all across, and that's not what we want. So we need to think about how can we change this velocity as driller is progressing. The way I do it, let me go back to break roof event and deactivate that so we can scrub through the timeline. So if you look at what's happening here, is it's only up to frame 60 maybe that everything should go up, and after frame 60 everything should go forward, because that's when driller is moving forward. So what I would do is at frame 60, let's go back to the velocity, and I'm going to actually I'm going to go to 59 and set a keyframe to 85, and also set a keyframe while I'm here on this one and also on X. At 60 I would like 85 to go down, not completely to 0, but maybe let's say 15, and set a keyframe. At that time X should go up to 20 because I want pieces to come forward, and set a keyframe, and this I will reduce further down to negative 10 and set a keyframe. So let's go back and see how this works out. Flying up and the pieces are flying forward. Okay, so this should work. Now something else I noticed here is that these pieces are sliding on the road as if the road was a sheet of ice, and that's not what we want. So let's go back to the input and geometry itself, and friction will increase this to something a very high value, 0.8, and let's run the simulation one more time. Okay, so now it looks like it's working out. I may change the value of negative Z a little bit. This is a little bit too far out. Maybe negative 15 or 20 that we have there is a little too much. Let's see what it is at frame 60. I think that's where we have the animation. Yep. So at 60 we have negative 10, so that should be okay, but maybe 55 we have negative 15, so let's bring it down to negative 10 also and set a keyframe. Okay, go forward. Okay, this should work. Alright, so a couple of other things I notice. This big piece here, as it falls on this barrier, it goes through, and that's not how it should be. So let's go back, and I'm going to do a couple of things here. Go to my display layer, and right now it's a reference in the geo road layer, so I'm going to make it not a reference. I'm going to select it, and I will add that to my simulation. So I'll connect that to the simulation. By default it's going to be active, so I want it not to respond to the force such as gravity. I want it to just stay there, but it should play a role in interacting with the pieces that are falling. Okay, so let's go back and run the simulation again. So now you can see that it's responding a little bit. It's still inside the barrier. This one is fine. This piece is right on the barrier, but this one got inside the barrier. Now that's because the collision detection is not set properly, and I'm not going to worry about it for now. I don't think it's going to play out a huge role in our final simulation anyway, because the pieces are going to be much smaller, and there will be a lot of other debris there and smoke and dust and everything, so you will not be able to see these things. It's always a fine balance between mathematically accurate solution and a visually accurate solution. So I'll just leave it at this, but let's increase our resolution here from 5 and 5 to 10 and 10, and you will see that as I double this, the simulation will run quite slowly. I'll only start the simulation just so that you get to see how slow it has become now, but then I'll cache it using the takes workflow, and then we should be fine. So let's just play it for now. And there is another thing that I'll do to make things a little faster as soon as this plays out. It's still running pretty fast once it calculates. Now all these pieces are going up and falling in the front, and yeah, I think that should work. Alright, what I was talking about in doing something to make the simulation a little faster is under the event we have a time filter here, and I'm not going to start this until, let's say 50, or maybe, yeah, let's say 50, so that the simulation will not run until we are at frame 50. So it will run very fast up to 50, and then it will slow down. Okay, so now at 48 it's preparing, I guess, for the simulation to happen at 50, and then you see everything is breaking and falling. Alright, so so that looks good. I'm going to create a take here for this simulation. So we'll go to take, we'll add, and we'll call this interior roof take 1, and I'll make it to disk. That way I can use it if I shut down and come back here, I can use it. Baked to keys will be temporarily baked. This is an important workflow also if you want to finally bake everything to the keys. At every keyframe you will see the red line to indicate that there is a keyframe set, but I'm not going to do it for now. While we are here, also say that you can also export this to Alembic, which you can then bring inside of other software such as Houdini or Fusion or Nuke. Okay, so let's go and bake to disk, And I'm going to pause the video for now and then come back as soon as the baking is done. Okay, so we are running the take, not the live simulation. So I'll go back and play, and you can see how fast it's playing now. Alright, so I'm going to stop this video here, and in the next video I'll talk about texturing these pieces, because what we have in reality is, if I go to global and say I don't want to see this, what we have are the geometries, but these geometries have no shader, and what we would want to do is shade this geometry exactly the way it was before the roof had broken. And Fracture has a very nice workflow around that, and also around the interior faces that are created in the process of breaking. How do you texture those, and also how do you displace those if you want to make it more realistic breaking and not a very smooth breaking. But that I'm not going to do in next video. The displacement, I'll do it when we start to break the concrete, because that's where it will be more visible and more appealing. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and in next video we'll pick up with the texturing, and thereafter we'll look at creating smoke by way of generating particles from the inside faces. Thanks a lot.